Well, look, when you're doing strategy work and you're developing strategy for your business or even like a client's business, you know who the most helpful person in that endeavor is? I mean, in my experience, it's not going to be your co-founder. It's not going to be your head of strategy or your head of marketing, CMO, whatever. It's not going to be your consultant if you're working with a consultant. And it's not even going to be your customer. It's especially not going to be your customer. No, I have actually found that the most helpful person is the one person who nobody ever bothers to involve in the strategy process. And that person is the person who simply doesn't care. I mean, this could be your spouse, this could be your mum, it could be your mate, some randomer off the street, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Just so long as whoever they are, they have zero interest in the business in question. All you have to do with these people, right, is you have to corner them, you have to explain your strategy, and then just see how it goes. Now, you might be asking, why on earth would this be valuable? Why would this be a good idea? The thing is, these people, these random people who don't know and don't care, these are the only people who are ever going to give you a cold read on your strategy. Everyone else you speak to are going to bring their own baggage, their own self-interest, their own sycophancy, their unrealistic levels of knowledge to the table when you're discussing ideas with them, and they're not going to give you a true read. But the person who doesn't care, look, if it's unclear, they're not going to understand it. If it's boring, they're going to be bored. If it doesn't make sense, they're going to question it. If it's complicated, they are going to force you to simplify it in order to explain it to them. And in short, they probably won't like it unless it is really, really good. Now, you might think, sure, Alex, that's fine, but these people, they don't understand my industry, but that is good. That's actually part of the exercise. You can explain the industry to them as part of the context, because that's, an important part of doing strategy, isn't it? To be able to cut through to the need to know information. And, you might also think, let's say that they don't understand the particular situation facing this business. But again, that should be baked into the strategy too. Their ignorance is a feature in this process, not a bug, right? It is something that you use in order to maximize the clarity and charisma of what you're saying. Your strategy should be simple enough and exciting enough and narrative driven enough to hold the interest and attention of anyone you explain it to. And just as importantly, your delivery and articulation of it should also be at that level too, right? Remember that great strategy is 50% about the idea and the substance, but it's 50% about how you sell it. And only when both of these things are maximized can you truly say that the strategy is finished. And by the way, I have a whole bunch of other videos coming out about this subject, so please subscribe to make sure that you get them. But look, regarding this chat that you might have to just some random person, a cool tip that I would recommend is to have this chat, record it, and then listen back and look out for the following things, which is where you're going to find the real gold in it, right? The first thing is, in the conversation, how do you see yourself trying to compensate for their lack of knowledge? How exactly are you simplifying things and making things broader? Now, chances are, frankly, this is how you should be talking about the strategy all the time, not just in this scenario. We want to be painting in those broad brushstrokes so people can get the general direction. Next, where do you start to lose them? And then how do you hear yourself in the conversation bringing it back? Because this is going to reveal information that's either convoluted or actually probably just totally superfluous, so you can just lose it. Next, where do they show the greatest interest? What is the hook in this thing that you're talking about? Now, it's very likely that you are actually sleeping on the most exciting part of your strategy, and their reaction is going to reveal what that is to you. It might actually reveal that there's something much more exciting and interesting lurking within that strategy that you've been kind of skirting over. And then finally, how do they say it back to you? When you get them to put it into their own words, it's quite possible that they're actually going to do a better job than you will, and they'll really kind of cut to the chase of things. Now, look, all in all, just assuming that your strategy is reasonably sound and it doesn't need to be pinned off altogether, you should find the optimal phrasing of your strategy within this conversation. This will be the version that really cuts through the crap, that really focuses on what matters and that phrases it plainly, which I think you've got to agree is pretty good value for 20 minutes of your time, no? And look, as a final bonus, I should note that you can also use these sort of disinterested, don't give a shit people for all sorts of other strategic purposes too. And one really good example is to ask them if they can tell what your strategy is simply by observing your business. In other words, is the thing that a casual observer sees when they look at your business, the same thing as what you want them to see. If not, then that's actually a pretty good sign that the strategy isn't really being executed properly. It isn't really coming through. You see this all the time where businesses think that they're all about X, but their customers think that they're all about Y. So that's a great way of sort of testing that situation. Another good thing is to use them in situations where you want to compare yourselves to a competitor. Do they really notice the differences that you do? And normally the answer is going to be no. Gaps between you and your competitor, which you see as chasms, they're probably going to barely notice, which will show you just how much harder you need to push to truly separate yourselves from the competitive set. Like I said, these guys are tough critics, and that's what makes them so good. They are not going to sugarcoat it the way that like so many colleagues and people like that are going to do. So look, give it a go. It is free and it will hold your thinking to the highest standard there is. Because, if you can convince someone who doesn't care, you are going to find convincing people who do care, your team, your customers, people like that, that's going to be a piece of cake. And for more no bullshit strategy takes like this, make sure you subscribe below to the Hidden Path newsletter. And before you rush out to take your mum for a coffee, make sure that you're actually saying something smart to her by checking out my ultimate strategy blueprint video right here.